Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
It's amazing how music can heal. It truly can. The arts can heal, help us move our lives forward, recognize certain things in us just by experiencing the energy that comes from that, the sound, the vibration, all of that. There's a wonderful organization that promotes the use of music and arts into the recovery of people dealing with mental health challenges and so much more. That organization is located in New York City, specifically located in Brooklyn, and it's Baltic Street into Action. The gentleman behind the program, it's a nonprofit, by the way, Peter Jampel, joins us once again here on the program. Peter, welcome back. How are you?
I'm good. So glad to be with you again, Steve.
Same. Last time we got together, we realized our connections to music
Yeah.
in different ways, but in some of the same ways, how it
Yes.
really does not only just connect us, but connect us together, but also connects us with us. Your
Yes.
journey when it comes to music and realizing those connections. Can you share that?
Yes. So, as we talked about last time, Steve, we all have our own personal story about who we are as people who engage in music on whatever level. And that personal story is important to understand in terms of the way in which not only you experience music, but the way in which you might anticipate people who you're going to meet and work with will experience music as well. So my own story, which started in my family, continues as a young guy, trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. Was I going to go to law school? Well, I was playing music with a couple of my buddies, and we were playing, rock music. And I got invited to play at a psychiatric facility in Brooklyn, which was part of Brooklyn State Hospital at the time. And I figured, hey, this is great. I love music. I'm going to try to bring that energy into this gig. And, what did I know? I was new. I just figured I'd bring it my best into the situation. Well, Steve, I wasn't exactly prepared for what I saw. This was the old reception building of Brooklyn State, and this was the fall of 1972. I'm going to bring you back. And music was not part of the experience of the people I was going to play for, that at least not in their current lives. This moment in time was the point at which New York State and the United States as a whole was mandated to deinstitutionalize people who had lived for years and years in state psychiatric facilities. And we were invited to do a concert for the first group of people in New York State who were on the path to deinstitutionalization. They led us into this locked unit that pretty much just threw me for a loop. It looked like something out of One Flew Over a Cuckoo's Nest. People were wandering aimlessly, talking to themselves. It was an old institutional green environment that seemed devoid of color and of connection with the environment. Well, we got up there, and there were three of us, and we were long-haired young guys bringing our energy, and we just launched into I Can't Get No Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones. And all of a sudden, these random groups of people who seemed to be out of it started to just sway to the music, started to act like a concert audience. And the three of us couldn't believe what we were seeing. And song after song, we really wanted to bring a visceral energy to what we were doing. And by the end of it, it was like normal. People were standing, dancing, applauding, singing. And when we walked out of there, we just went, what just happened? What was that? Well, I'm going to fast forward you now to a few years later. So I decided not to go to law school. I got a job the next spring in working for this newest state hospital called South Beach Psychiatric Center. And it was the last facility built during the Nelson Rockefeller administration, designed to put real resources into community mental health. I was now working for them. I was, really starting to understand that I had my raw energy and love of music, but I was kind of in over my head. And I went for training. And then I went for my master's degree. And in 1977, which is before I entered the master's program, we moved into a facility in Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn, that I saw had this tremendous potential. Wow. It was an old city public health station, and it had a full basement auditorium with a stage and wings and everything. And it took a while, but I realized, wow, this place can really be something. This place has the potential to be a complete community music and arts mental health center. So we're now in the late 70s. My Friday music group, which we call the Community Sing, was the last group of the week. We ended in song. And over time, people emerged in the program who were musicians and loved music, and singers, guitarists, bass players, keyboard players, songwriters. And gradually, we formed a band that, was like the house band.
Wow.
So, as I explained with self-expression, so we were fully engaging people in the expression through music. And because we had this cohesive community program, the sense of belonging and of connection to a consistent group of people who cared about each other evolved. And as we were doing music consistently, people wanted to get better. They were motivated to increase their skill level, hence the idea of achievement. And as I explained the last time, Steve, self-expression, belonging, and achievement are a self-reinforcing loop that gets people motivated to get better and better. So by about 1989, 1990, we claimed that space in the auditorium and started to rehearse. And we were hired in 1991 by Hospital Audiences Incorporated, which is a group that brought musicians, professional musicians, to institutional settings. And for us to get paid $400 a gig was so rewarding for all the work that we put in, and giving us a sense of, wanting to do more and better. So we worked for Hospital Audiences for 2 years, developed a name for ourselves, the Baltic Street Band. And we played out, while I was actively involved, for 19 years. So I was, I was the roadie, I was the band manager, I helped set up the equipment, I drove the van, I was the chief cook and bottle washer. But gradually, other people fulfilled those roles. And what I saw was that we created like a magnet. People wanted to be part of this. And we developed that auditorium into a performance center and had a monthly cabaret called the After Hours Club. And that brought together not only the musicians, but in the program, and by 1986, I became the director of the program as well as the music therapist. We had developed a range of arts therapies. We had a full-fledged art studio, and it was its own subculture. And they had this fantastic operation where they not only painted as a little colony of artists, but then they learned how to mat and frame and exhibit, and they exhibited widely. We had, at one point, we had dance movement therapists hired. I was also a drama therapy internship supervisor. We did poetry therapy. We created an entire arts culture that was culminated each month in the cabaret. And as you can imagine, when you have a cabaret, it brought everybody together. We catered it. The food group became a key part of it. We developed a professional sound system and a lighting system. And we brought in poets, we brought in comedians, we brought in international musicians and people in the creative arts therapies. We hosted the first of a number of festivals in Brooklyn under the auspices of the Brooklyn Mental Health Council. And it became a anchor of what we ultimately saw as this arts community that networked widely, not only in Brooklyn, New York City, but internationally, from Norway, from Japan, from Denmark. We hosted other groups of people who had serious and persistent mental health challenges. And we all came together as an international community, recognizing the power of the arts to, engage on the deepest level. So
Wow.
let me now say, Steve, this is like, to me, was like being part of the Woodstock generation and being the first generation of young people who were hired by South Beach Psychiatric Center and told to go change the world, that we were going to develop community centers. We were going to gradually drain the major state institutions and create a meaningful network of services in the community. And our program was the arts center of my hospital. And as the word spread, people from other hospitals and other boroughs wanted in, but there was no other place but us. And we had certain limitations because we, at that point, had catchment areas, which meant we could only serve people who lived in our geographic location. And so I was the gatekeeper for an organization where people were knocking on the door like, how do I get in? And where do I go find these services elsewhere? Steve, I can tell you that I thought if I was talking to you today, that I could imagine that there would be a whole network of arts and mental health centers around New York City and beyond. And in fact, things did not work out that way. And I think this is important to understand because partly this is what Baltic Street into Action is trying to address from the not-for-profit world. Because services in mental health and in the arts instead of moving in the direction of providing community-based services, which would inspire people to continue the gains that they made while they were in acute care psychiatric units, where the concentration of creative arts therapists today is most notable. People, if you were taking medication while you were on a psychiatric unit and someone told you, well, we won't have medication for you when you leave the hospital, you go, what? No medication? Well, I feel the same way about music and the arts. When people connect in psychiatric facilities, and this happens all the time, music and the arts are the most popular groups on acute care psychiatric units, but there's no follow-up when they leave the hospital. And what a waste. What a total waste of the power of music and the arts to create continuity and to take advantage of that existing connection and work it for all it's worth when people leave the hospital. So, you know, one of the things that I want to emphasize in terms of what Baltic Street into Action is all about is that the idea of people leaving state and city and not-for-profit institutions and being supported in the community is something that we strongly endorse. And yet there's a real lack of resources available for people when they leave the hospital. Now, why that is, Steve, you and I could talk for a long time to figure out why and what to do. But one of the things that we're doing is that we want to support projects that allow people to continue the gains that they have made and to use that as a rock of support for their recovery in the community. So I know that's a mouthful, Steve, and you know there's more to this story, but that's the essential mission of Baltic Street into Action.
Thank you for sharing. And what a wonderful story. It just, to me, the follow-up is people just don't get it. They don't understand what the arts and what music does to people, because maybe it's hard to quantify, but it's easy to take a pill box and say, here you go. And I'm curious now, the people receiving treatment became part of the band, part of the experience. Now, you say that some of them had acute mental health challenges.
Yes.
How did that go? How did that work? When you integrate them into music where, you know, somebody plays drums or they, you know, they're musically inclined and can play a bass or whatever it might be, was it almost as if they didn't have mental challenges? They just jumped into that role?
Well, I wouldn't go that far. They certainly still did have mental health challenges. But I would say that those challenges were put into better balance by their concentration on positive, constructive musical activities that increase their self-esteem, sense of self-worth, their recognition by their peers for their talents, their acknowledgement that they're more than their illness. It moved away from an old-fashioned medical model of seeing mental health by diagnostic categories. Now, they were musicians who had mental health challenges. And Steve, have you ever known a musician who had a mental health challenge. They all do. It's just a matter of degree. And,
Hmm.
you know, once you realize that we all have mental health challenges, it's just a matter of degree. And if music is playing a constructive role in your life, it builds your sense of capacity to cope and to overcome. And
Sure.
one of the fascinating aspects of achievement is once you can get past stage fright and putting yourself out there and working with other people in front of an audience and being able to overcome that, you know, it carries over into other parts of your life where you think, you know what? All right, it's really a matter of my determination, discipline, and my motivation to keep going and to keep dealing with all the challenges. And the people I work with had more challenges than most,
Hmm.
but they didn't seem so enormous and overwhelming.
Well, to your point, David Byrne from the Talking Heads has revealed over the years that he has autism. He's on the spectrum.
Mhm.
Musical genius. Other artists say that they listen to his music on a monthly basis, um, once in a lifetime in particular. And I'm talking about contemporary artists, not, people are in their 70s, like people that are in their 40s and 30s listen to his music just because it does something for them. And with his autism, he has said that it gives him a way of communicating and connecting.
Yeah,
And like you said, we all have challenges mentally, and he freely admits it. Um, do you feel that for the people we're referring to that were part of the band over the years, it gave them a sense of purpose?
clearly it gave them a sense of purpose, of meaning. What are we all struggling for in our own lives? To find purpose and meaning. And, you know, a lot of people, their music is a part of their way of coping, sometimes with less than meaningful jobs
Sure.
and less than, you know, satisfying life circumstances. It's a way of holding on to that part of your life that you feel passionate about and connecting. And I'll say one other thing in this regard. You know, the relationships that I developed, not only the band was only part of it, by the way, Steve. There was a full range of music therapy groups, individual services. We developed a recording studio.
Mm.
We had music technology became a very important aspect of the music therapy program. But what became very clear was that, you know, the relationships that I developed with my fellow musicians started to transcend the labels of I'm a therapist, you're a client, I'm, you know, there's a kind of inherent lack of equality that often is part of the issue of being in treatment. Oh, you know, you're trying to tell me how to live my life. You know, as musicians, you realize
Mm.
after a while that these other labels are not part of what you're working on. You're working on making music together.
Right.
And so gradually, the relationships that I developed um, reconstructed my sense of who we were to each other. We were people making music, and I was aware of my role, not only as a music therapist, I was the program director, blah, 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 you know, all these things. But the essential transformation was not only in terms of how people took music into their lives, but how we saw each other and how we developed relationships that transcended labels and who empower relationships. It was a meeting, a true, authentic meeting in the music.
It was magical. That's what I'm getting from this. We're out of time. I so much appreciate you sharing all of this, the story, the journey for Baltic Street. How do we, somebody wants to learn more, how do they find you?
Okay. So go to our website, balticstreetintooaction.com. You'll see our projects, and in the coming weeks, I'm going to be talking about what we're doing and how we're trying to bring music and the arts to mental health treatment.
It's so needed. Medication, there's a place for that, but come on, there's much more going on here. And you go back to the basics of life in this, where hundreds of years, thousands of years ago, they didn't have medication. They had a couple of plants. They made music, and it was therapeutic, and they realized the value of that. And I think we forgot all of that. And now
time to remember it.
It
works.
It works. Thank you so much for being here, Peter.
You bet. Take
Appreciate
care,
it.
Steve.
You too.
Bye.
We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.